everyone, and welcome back to the Social Media Derby podcast. Again, you're here with Jonty and Antony. We've got a great show lined up for you today after just watching the FA Cup final. Ant, how you doing, mate?
I've been better. Yeah, definitely been better. Not the greatest day to rock the new retro kit.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna do it anyway because it's beautiful. But yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, so we'll get into Ant and his inevitable disappointment soon. But obviously, first, we would just want to say, if you're new to the pod, if you've been listening over the last couple of episodes that we've put out, please remember, on audio platforms, if you can, give us a like, give us a follow on Apple Music or Spotify. If you're watching through YouTube, again, as you know, please subscribe if you can, like, comment down below, because I'm sure there are a lot of takes like me last week that you probably disagree with. So please feel free to, comment down below and engage with us. We've got plenty of, let's say, energy to get back to comments and to talk about and discuss some of the things that we're talking about. All right. Let us know also if there's a topic that you want us to cover. All right. So with that out of the way, let's get into what was actually quite a competitive final. I didn't think it would be. And how did you feel about the game today? It was pretty competitive, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we said on the last pod, it could go one of two ways. We could either get slapped to smithereens, a la 6-3, like we did in the Etihad fixture in the league, or it would be a tight kind of nip and tuck kind of game either way. And I mean, the scoreline suggests it was quite tight, and I don't think one team. It was hard. It was a hard watch to listen to the punditry after the match because everyone was obviously like glorifying City. They're a great team, but I don't think they even got out of second gear. I've got to be honest. I think they looked quite tired.
To add to that as well, it was a hard watch or listen to the bloody commentary during the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jermaine Jenas, I don't know how he gets work. Like I've got nothing against him. And actually, remember that cage football when they did the Jogo Bonito thing with Nike did all those years ago? I remember going down to the Millennium Dome, and he was one of the like celeb footballers who came in and took part. And I always thought he was a decent guy, but his commentary shocking. Like he was. I don't like to assume people have agendas, but he literally was just spouting rubbish about United the whole game, and was just riding Man City hard throughout the whole match. And we said in the group chat, I think fair dues. Like when he was a player, we slapped him up silly wherever he was. We slapped him. When he was at Spurs, we battered him. When he was at Newcastle, when they were actually good with Shearer and all of that, we still slapped them. They were our little. Well, they were our babies, as Patrice Evra always used to say about you lot. But they were actually our babies. But now back to the match. Yeah, it was hard because I think City are obviously probably the best team around right now. I don't know if we can really argue with that. And I really don't think they had to play that well. I don't think we played very well. And I think it was a real... that match proved how long and grueling this season has been with the World Cup in between and everything like that. Because both teams looked quite... After about 35 minutes, they both looked kind of sapped of energy. Even though City had more of the ball, and so they looked like they were kind of more front foot, they still didn't really look like they were going to score. I mean, like Haaland obviously had a shot that De Gea saved, but I mean, it was right at him. And there were spaces, breaking up in the midfield and stuff. There was a lot of room, but I don't think there were many clear-cut chances on either side. And if you look at the 3 goals, one was a pen, which I think personally it's harsh. Handball rule's harsh, but if your hand's up, there's a chance it's going to bang off your hand and it's going to be given. If we look back at the Luke Shaw handball at Brighton, his hand was up. He wasn't trying to handball it. It hit his hand was up, and they gave a pen. Like, obviously, I think Luke Shaw's one, I don't know if it's exactly the same situation, but, you can see them given, and then Bruno tucks it away. But their 2 goals, one's a volley in like the first 20 seconds, which is, the strike's unbelievable. He almost like slices it with the side, like the other side of his foot, and puts
basically
it in almost the top bins. Yeah. And that was a great finish. but really you wouldn't say that's a chance. That's less than a half chance. And then the second goal they scored, again, not a great goal. Like I mean, from Gundogan's perspective, he still hits it quite well, not perfectly clean, but well enough that it gathers a bit of speed. But De Gea should be saving that, and at worst, someone should be closing him down, and it should be blocked or something like that. So there weren't really many chances, right? I know we hit the bar with like a looping thing right at the end, but that wasn't really a chance. That was kind of a penalty box scramble. So I think the quality of the final wasn't super high, but I think that was probably because City didn't have to be that good. And if we played better, you probably would have seen City would have upped it and they would have played better as well. And you may have still got the same result. But no,
Yeah.
it wasn't a good game from our perspective. And I think I could only pick maybe one or two players who I think came out with any kind of credit. Like the rest of the team were either average or poor. So yeah, what was your take?
No, I mean, I had it quite similar to you. I think the way that and no offense to you, I think it's smart that you can't let City play, but the way that you set up, I don't think it was ever going to be an interesting game. Like I can count very few times throughout the game, or at least in the first, let's say 65 odd minutes, I can count very few times where you had a man in front of the ball while defending, right? Like you were defending quite deep. You were defending quite compact for the most part, apart from obviously the goal and you know how things went in the first couple of minutes. But you were defending really deep, quite compact, and it was just really difficult. And like you kind of said earlier, like off screen, it didn't really seem like they had a lot of energy. City didn't. They kind of seemed like they weren't. They were running out of ideas at certain points, and they didn't really get any clear cut chances. It was just a lot of keeping the ball. And outside of the first goal, and then I think immediately after that, like Rodri had another chance. Outside of that, really, it was a bit dead for a while, right? So, I mean, I guess with that in mind, I'd say it wasn't the most riveting final, but it definitely was competitive, right? And it wasn't just like a one-sided domination, right? I think up until they scored their second goal, it was still very much in the balance. And I was saying this is an even match. There's still a chance that you can nick something here. But when that second goal went in, from there, obviously you started making some substitutions that obviously left you susceptible to getting counter attacked. It forced Ten Hag to do something. And I think at that point, that's where I was like, yeah, this game feels over. Like when you started bringing on like Weghorst and McTominay and Garnacho looked good and he did have a good couple of chances. I think he put one just wide of the right post. Almost like one of his first few touches on the ball, he was really good. But when you saw like Weghorst and McTominay coming on, it was a bit different. Now it started feeling like you weren't really going to get anything done. And I think actually the two of those substitutions made you a bit worse, if I'm honest with you. The Garnacho for Eriksen one for me made a lot of sense. But anyway, let's maybe rewind a little bit. And we did touch on the penalty. And I do want to say, so with that penalty for Grealish, do you think that his arm was in an unnatural position?
So this is a really hard thing to judge, though, isn't it? Because for me, I can't really judge as someone who, I guess, hasn't played the game to a really high level what a natural or unnatural position is. So for me, like I would assume if you're jumping, it's fairly normal to have your hands and your arms, not by your side because no one jumps with their arms by their side. But at the same time, I think there's a certain height where if your hand is up and out, then like you're running a risk that it's like for a header, your arms don't need to be like way away from your body. They can be like they can be in a normal jumping kind of stance. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was just clumsy from Grealish, to be honest. That's why I feel like he opened himself up for like an accidental ricochet to hit his hand or something like that, and then look, worse than it was. So it's a really hard one because you saw it in the Europa League final, didn't you, with Roma and Sevilla, where Mourinho was losing his rag because he thought that Anthony Taylor should have given a penalty. And with that one, I think that one's closer to his body and slightly more natural, but I can still say his arm doesn't need to be out there. So if your arm doesn't need to be in that place, then I think that's a better way of kind of framing this whole conversation rather than this natural, unnatural, because maybe a professional footballer or someone who works in the game, like a referee, knows and has a more definitive kind of definition for it. But I don't have one. So when I saw that in real time, I thought, wow, he's running a risk. If that hit his hand, that's going to be a pen. Like, um, it's not even going to be. I don't think it will even be something which will be super controversial, because you just know if your hand is up there somewhere, it's kind of clumsy. You can give away a pen. Um, but it's weird because I think when the ball's on the floor and someone hits it at your arm, and even if it's in an unnatural position, they do like a proximity rule as well, where they go, "Oh, it's too close. You couldn't have moved your hand out of the way." And you think that
Yeah,
should be consistent with in the air and when on the ground, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So
yeah.
for me, it's hard for me to. When I looked at it, I thought that could be a pen if it's hit his hand, because he's up, his hands out in like away from his body. Like, it's going to look worse than it is. And it almost was kind of like that one that we got against PSG that time when Dallo slapped it, and like I think it was Kimpembe put his arm out like this, like unnaturally, or not unnaturally, but like kind of quite far away from his body, and it like kind of accidentally hit the ball, and then we got the pen for that. So,
I
and like I said, the Luke Shaw one earlier against Brighton, like they just, your arms don't need to be in those places, I guess,
so,
to
so
jump. So if it gets given, it gets
I'm
given.
going to play the devil's advocate here, and I'm going to say if you watch it back, right? So Jack Grealish is jumping with his eyes on the ball, so he's in front of the man, right? The man is behind him for the most part when the ball's going out there. So he jumps up facing the ball. It goes past him, and he has to turn, and that's where his arms start to move out because he's turning around. And actually, if you slow down the footage, you'll see that when the ball actually hits Wan-Bissaka's head, like when he heads the ball, Grealish had literally just about turned to face the ball. So he has absolutely no time, and he's spinning or turning, which, as you know, obviously it's hard to turn as well without actually moving your upper torso. And that's why I think that the whole unnatural thing, and I did some reading into this afterwards just because I was like, I really don't even understand what the rules are anymore, right? But and so it says a player is considered to have made their body unnaturally bigger when the position of their arm is not a consequence of the player's body movement for that specific situation. And so I'm thinking in my head, how do you turn without your arms turning with you? So I'll be honest with you, you saw me in the group chat. As soon as that went up, I was like, that is the softest pen I've seen in my life. Because when we talk about all these other ones, right? If a player's facing the ball and it's on a trajectory towards them and they're moving in that way, it's easier for them to try to make an adjustment about where their arm might be. If they're literally facing the ball there and where the ball is coming from that trajectory, their arms are nowhere near it, they turn around and someone slapped the ball at them. I feel like that's really, really, really harsh. Because I've seen, what was it? There was a couple where there was like sliding challenges made to try to block, yeah, like a shot, right? And the arms were behind them and the ball has hit it. But they literally cannot even see where the ball is and it's hit their arm. So I think I personally think it was a very soft pen. And I guess my next thing would be then off of that. Do you think the Fred challenge on De Bruyne was a pen?
So no, ultimately I agree with you though on the Grealish one. Like, I don't think anyone for certain can watch and see, like, you could tee up like 10 or 15 different incidents which have been given and not given for handball offences, and you probably wouldn't be able to even get a consistent answer from the referee. So I think they definitely need to look at that rule and try and make it more kind of airtight, so that there's something that is consistent throughout the logic of given or not given them. I understand they might make mistakes every now and again, and that's fair enough as long as they come out and acknowledge it like they have been. With the Fred one, I didn't think that was a pen in real time, and when I look back at it, I'm still not sure if there is even any contact whatsoever, and the ball just kind of rolls through them. I know their feet are very close, but honestly, I didn't, and I'm not Fred's biggest fan. And normally, you can tell when he's done something really clumsy and terrible. like he was doing in the second half. Like he was giving away fouls almost every time he was near a City player. It was a foul because he'd done something stupid and clumsy. But that one I didn't think it was. But it's hard. You start to like second guess, and this is why we go back to the commentary thing. Because Jermaine Jenas was absolutely spouting breeze throughout the whole match. It was hard. Like even me, diehard United fan, was thinking, "Wow, all right, maybe he's right." Like he's talking with such confidence about this incident and that incident, and then you go and watch the replay, and you can even hear his co-commentator was silent. You know, normally when they like support each other and they think someone's saying something that's fairly on point, or they're trying to encourage them to try and keep the conversation going, they kind of enter into a discussion about it. But the co-commentator was just silent. He was like, I think even he was flabbergasted by the absolute was that Jermaine Jenas was coming out with. So I didn't think that one was a pen. But I mean, I've seen people say it was. So it's hard, but I don't think it was. I thought that would have been ultra soft. If R1 was soft, with even though the rule says that opens ambiguity for that, and you've had other incidents where you've given pens for that, I think the Fred one would have been a really bad decision.
They're about the same, because I mean, like, I know what Fred's doing in that situation. Right, he's doing what most players do, which is if you get a ball that's a bit short and there's a player kind of encroaching upon like your left or right shoulder, you'll try and put your body across them, right? And you'll try and put your body across them so that in order for them to get to the ball, they've got to go through you, and you'll try and buy a foul of some kind, right? Or you're going to try and turn them. And he did it. I guess the ball coming into him, he just did it, and it wasn't perhaps the right time. And he did get a bit of contact on De Bruyne's foot. Again, very, very soft. I would personally say neither of the penalties or the penalty shouts were a penalty. So the first one, I don't think it was a handball. The second one, if that's a foul, then you literally just can't touch anyone anymore, right? So I think generally throughout the game, I personally thought the officiating was pretty shocking. There were yellow cards given out at random times. The Casemiro one where he's fouled Akanji and he's got the foul. it was a poor performance, and it just caps off what I'll say is a very poor week for refereeing. And obviously, don't want to get into like Anthony Taylor and what happened there. Obviously, don't want to see a referee getting attacked by fans. But we've had a shocking week for refereeing. It has been absolutely poor, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because during the match, watching it, I didn't think he was that like catastrophically terrible. I don't think either of the penalty shouts, the way they were given, were absolute howlers either way. Like I hear what you're saying. I could have understood if that penalty wasn't given. I don't think it would have been a howler to not give it. And equally, maybe the Fred one, I would have thought more strongly about it because, like you said, I agree. Those kind of actions happen a lot in a match where a player's trying to like see a ball through, so they put their body across the other player. And I don't think he did anything stronger than just like the average action, that a player does for that would warrant a penalty. So I think that would have been a howler if they gave it.
Yeah.
But the pen could have gone either way, and I think that would have been fine. The Casemiro one, you're right. Like in the group chat, we're obviously bantering back and forth, and there was, Casemiro attacks being added to every challenge he did. But I do think he probably could have got a yellow for that, and it definitely was a foul the other way because he was a bit late and he stepped on Akanji's like foot, kind of lower ankle. But then equally, Aaron Wan-Bissaka got a yellow card for not making any contact with Grealish and completely missing the ball.
Yeah, no, when that happened, I was like, he's about a metre away from Grealish. What that is just a really bad slide tackle. Or not even like a slide tackle. It was like an interception he was trying to make, essentially. And then when I saw the replay back, he's touched him like a fraction of his lace or whatever, and he's got a yellow card for it. It was shocking.
But even that, it looked like Grealish's foot touched his. So his foot was going directly in one trajectory. Grealish was moving and coming down and fell on it. And so, Grealish was a bit of a C word in this match.
And what, Casemiro kicking balls into his head.
Yeah, he deserved that one. And now I'm building up a nice bit of like a repertoire of kind of like some evidence for my Grealish hate. Because even though I don't really hate Grealish, and I think he has been a good player at Villa, I think he's been a mad flop at City. I think people can't wait to get on their knees and give him a good one as soon as he plays a couple of good matches because he's the media darling. We were talking about it after the match. they were rolling him out and John Stones to try and get all the lovely, little sound bites and get his little cheeky chappy. Oh, I'm going to go out in a lash. Big Meeks, you're going to come and join me. Hey, and all that rubbish. Like, it was shameful. And yeah, it was like, he's had good matches this season. Today was not one. He was not good. I thought Wan-Bissaka had him on lock. I don't think he did anything throughout any of the match. And I think actually it was Gundogan who turned up, and it was their defensive players like Diaz and Rodri who played quite well. And their goalie was decent.
Ortega made a good one right at the end when they kind of hit like P rolled onto the bar. Kind of, they had a little opportunity at the end, didn't they? And he did a pretty good job as well.
He was good with his feet as well.
Yeah.
And I don't like, Haaland was pretty silent. I thought Varane had a good game. I think our defense overall, Shaw had a pretty good game as well against Bernardo. I don't think Bernardo got changed from him at all. I thought he had a really good game. I thought Lindelof looked pretty solid as well throughout. Casemiro's got one of those games where he's obviously of a certain age now, right? He needs runners around him. And Fred, although he was moving like a bozo in the second half, he was still energetic. But the problem was the weaker link, and I'm sure you're going to have questions around this later, Eriksen did nothing for him. That little Eriksen-Sancho side on the right-hand side absolutely went missing. They were not involved in the game. And they didn't have legs. They couldn't string a pass together. And it looked like they also failed their defensive duties, especially with Eriksen, because he was the man who needed to close down Gundogan for the volley in the 15 seconds. And he was the man who was supposed to be closing Gundogan down on the edge of the box for his second goal as well. So beyond just the fact that the things that Eriksen is supposed to be good at, which is keeping the ball, controlling the ball, ticking it over, passing it, finding his teammates, he was terrible at that. And then he couldn't even do the basics of just closing a man down, or he was too slow to get out there. So, it was just... I think both sides, apart from Gundogan, who I think just shows up clutch continually, and I think Varane deserves a shout out for somehow managing to hold on to the beast and not let Haaland run us ragged. I don't know if there were standouts in a good way. I think there were more standouts in a bad way in this final than there were in the positive. But yeah, maybe that's just my pessimism after losing.
Well, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think there weren't too many star players apart from Gundogan, right? Like when he had that third goal that got disallowed in the end, I was so happy for him. I can't wait for him to leave City just so I can buy a shirt with his name on it. Now I can't get away with it, but if he leaves and goes to someone I don't hate, I'm buying a shirt with his name on it, mate. Do you remember that Roy Keane clip where he's like, where Gundogan says, "Oh, I'm not special." And Roy Keane says, "Oi," and like stops him and says, "No, you are, mate." And I just feel like that about him. He's absolutely class. He was the standout of that game, and I don't even think it was one of his best games. Like you said, right? Like Haaland was pretty quiet. It feels to me like when you get real deep, I think it was maybe the combination of defending quite deep and then having someone like Varane who is really physical. Like you look at him and you think, "Oh, not sure." He is tall, but actually he's really strong, right? There was a couple times where they were just, and it was really weird for me to see, but it was just basically De Bruyne just hoofing it up. They were literally just looking at Haaland, seeing Varane and then whoever else, Lindelof next to him, and then just hoofing it over the top. And Varane dealt with it really well. He just got his body in front, like basically kept Haaland quiet, apart from obviously the first header, but that wasn't even really, that was Casemiro trying to challenge for that header. So obviously that's not going to work out too well. But I think, there weren't too many standouts in general. And I think, like you said, there were a lot more poor performances than there were good performances. And that kind of gets us onto an interesting topic, which is City's second goal. So you mentioned it a little bit before. I want to get into De Gea, right? And I want to get into, we saw some things, some people saying, "Oh, he didn't have vision. He couldn't see the ball. He doesn't, what's he supposed to do about it? He did pretty well to get his hand on it, etc., etc." What's your viewpoint on this? Because I feel like you've got a pretty strong view in the opposite direction, don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to get back to... I want to ask you a question about the sitting deep thing, because when I watched the match, I think in the first half, I don't know if we were that deep. Obviously, you've got to sit back to a certain extent with City, but I actually thought in the first half we strung some really good passes around, and it wasn't just a like complete counter attacking job. Because
Oh
I
no, no.
remember there
So
were moments in the first half where we had them camped out in their
yeah,
side.
so it
But I
wasn't
think
a
in the
part of the
second
bus.
half,
So I'm not saying
yeah,
that
yeah,
always a part of the bus. I just mean the way that you behaved when you didn't have the ball. So you definitely
yeah,
got the ball
no,
back at times, and this was part of the reason why you managed to get the ball back so much. I think is because as soon as they got the ball and started trying to play out some of their, their typical type football, it at almost every point you had 11 men behind the ball. It was really, in my mind, really, really smart. It's the only way you can defend against City and kind of break them
no, I
down
hear
and
you.
stop De Bruyne and all of their weapons, because they haven't got a counter attack type team. So when they get the ball back from you, unless they just hoofer it over and you try and get Haaland to outmuscle someone, Bruno Silva ain't that quick. Grealish ain't that quick.
Bruno
Not
Silva.
Bruno. What was it?
You've
Bernardo
combined
Silva.
Bernardo and Bruno.
Bernardo
But no,
Silva
man,
ain't that quick. Grealish ain't that quick.
yeah.
They haven't got loads of speedy players in there apart from Haaland. And if you've got Varane to kind of nullify that, it was a really smart tactic. Off the ball, just sit deep and
Yeah,
sit
I hear you.
structured, if that makes sense, right?
I hear you, but I think actually in the first half, the way I saw it, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but the way I saw it was we always had two outlets like beyond the ball in their half, ready to run, and that's why I say the first half felt like an action. Like the first half was better to watch because I don't think we were the stereotypically. And again, I don't mean park the bus, but I do think Ten Hag actually was a little bit more courageous in that first half, and he had Rashford and he had Sancho always ahead of the ball. And it was only, I think, in the last few minutes of the first half where I think clearly the instruction was see it out at 1-1, get into half time, and then we recoup and we go back again and try and do the same thing again. And that's why I thought actually, we played a decent first half. And if we'd carried on with that kind of level, I don't know if we would have lost 2-1 or maybe it still would have been, but it would have been a much better second half. And it wouldn't have been, I agree with you, in the second half, 9 times out of 10, we had everyone behind the ball, especially after the subs. We had everyone behind the ball because, again, with Weghorst, you can't even really do the out ball over the top or anything like that. So I think, yeah, it transformed into that. But that's why I actually thought the first half was decent because I was like, wow, Sancho and Rashford are always ahead of the ball. Like we're not fully parking it or not parking it, but sitting back as deep as we wanted, and we had options every single time we got the
Oh,
ball,
for
and
sure.
it
I
wasn't
think,
just one or
but your
two,
back line was
and they did a good job.
always about a foot away from the edge of
No,
your
the
box,
back line,
right?
the
Like
back line was
maybe
deep.
you
That
did have,
we didn't play a high
yeah,
line.
you
We didn't
maybe
play a
had
high
a
line. The
couple of
back line was deep.
people like sitting on the halfway line. That I get that completely. But past that, your defense and your kind of midfield didn't really have too many spaces. And I'm not including the first goal in this because obviously that's just like a freak. You haven't set up properly for it. You're thinking the game's going to be a bit more open, and then that kind of happens out of nowhere. But other than that, like when City got the ball, and again, like I said before, they're not really a counter-attacking team. So they kind of get the ball and they start passing it around, and all right, they've got the ball now for quite some time. And it was really structured, and there weren't too many gaps in those kinds of situations for them to exploit. And that's why I don't think, you said it before earlier off screen, like, De Bruyne didn't have a good game. And I want to give some credit to you guys. I don't think he had a good game because of you. Like, for me, when you see De Bruyne, he's whipping balls in, and it seems like, yeah, he's just crossing the ball, but actually he's always putting it in behind. Almost every single time he's whipping one in where you're thinking, how the hell is this going to curl around and get to someone on the pitch and not just go flying off it? But he didn't have anything to whip round. There was no space in behind you for him to whip something there. And obviously that's partly because of Varane's ability to like control Haaland and control the positioning and make sure he's in the right position at all times. But I think you nullified his ability to do that. And that's why they had to look to other players. And that's why they're such a good team that when De Bruyne ain't firing, when Haaland's a bit shy, they still managed to do something with it, right? They still got Gundogan to just slap one in outside of the foot god out here, top bins. And so I think you definitely deserve, and I think Ten Hag too, deserves a lot of credit for I guess the lack of excitement that came from City today, right? That, like we said before, there was only two ways they were going to beat you. Freak goal, which I'm going to put the first one in there, or De Gea clanger, and I think
Yeah,
we should get onto that. All right, like,
yeah.
how did you
Let's
see
get back to
that
that question.
second goal, and what do you like? What do you think of the argument that it's not his fault, or that it's not too much of his fault, or whatever else?
Let's be completely clear. He should save that. So when we say clanger, maybe the word clanger is going to offend people and make it seem like he's done a Massimo Taibi and it's rolled through his legs, and it's not that. But a top quality goalie, I'd even argue a mid-table Premier League goalie, first choice goalie, should save that shot. Um, and we've heard, for example, Schmeichel on post game talk about the triangle of where a goalie should be placed on those kind of situations, and the goalie should try and aim to be in the middle of the triangle or closer to the middle of the triangle. And he's actually closer to the middle of the goal and to the far left of the triangle, so he has too much. He has too much kind of yardage to make up to make the save. But I don't know, man. I don't think an experienced goalie who's played for Man United for more than 10 years should be making those kind of mistakes. And I just mean positionally, right? If Schmeichel's saying this, he was talking about it like it was some kind of goalkeeping fundamentals that every goalie knows about. So if he's saying it like that, then young goalies are learning about this. All goalies are understanding this. You would expect a goalie who's been at United for 10 seasons and performed really well in loads of those seasons for the majority of them to be making a mistake like that in a cup final. And I think the issue is it's not the worst clanger he's made. It's maybe not even in the clanger box, but it's a shot he should definitely save. So the other argument is you've got people like Mark Goldbridge and stuff like that talking about how it's come through, players, and he's kind of got an obscured vision of the ball. And he's citing, for example, when he's on Ben Foster's podcast, they're often with obviously Ben Foster's top goalie, or had been, still a goalie now, and the goalkeeping coach Dave Watson talks about really the shot comes from the last kind of the distance, the true distance of the shot is once it's past the last body. So it doesn't matter if it's a 30-yard shot, if it passes through all the people and then it's got 10 yards to come to the goalie, that's the true distance and reaction time De Gea has to save it. And I accept that. But if you look, because they showed a couple of great angles in there on commentary, on the coverage shots, we talked about it, from behind Gundogan and from behind De Gea. And for both of them, you can see the ball passes one person. Now, don't get me wrong, there's Varane and Luke Shaw and other people on the sides. But De Gea, if he's in the right position, can see the ball is only going to pass through Varane. So if it passes through Varane, you can guess where it's going. If it hits Varane, then it's crazy, right? Like you're going to have to rely on unbelievable reactions, luck, all kinds of stuff to stop it. But that's essentially what we accept a deflection is, right? If it deflects off someone and goes in, we never blame the goalie. We hardly ever go, the goalie should have saved that. He's got to do better, because we understand that's an anomaly situation. It's very hard to react. You basically have to have like cat-like reflexes to be able to save shots like that. And so I just don't buy it. That's a cop-out. And I get why people do it, because De Gea has been a great player for us. And we talked about it on previous podcasts, right? Like whether we should keep or sell him or release him or whatever. There's a lot of affinity to him because he's been a good player for us. But if we start to think back to how many games he's cost us, how many ties he's cost us, how many finals and trophies he's cost us, they're tallying up now, man. I can think of them. Like there's an FA Cup final against Chelsea where I think Hazard scored and he should have saved it. Like again, that's a clanger. He should have saved it, and he's cost us an FA Cup, which I'm sure Mourinho would have loved, right, at the time. So, and he's done it in numerous other really important moments, and it's just one too many. Like you have to save that. And I'm pretty sure if the shoe's on the other foot, I'm not even talking Edison here. I'm talking Ortega, who was in goal for them, their second choice goalie. I'm pretty sure he would have saved it. So if you're at the position where our first choice goalie is not better than City's second choice goalie, you've got an issue, man. And so I see it, I understand, I know, I think I understand the agenda Goldbridge and a lot of people have when they defend De Gea. A lot of it's about we need to defend our foreign players. A lot of the British players get, like Harry Maguire, They get more lives. They get more lives than cats out here. They're just constantly making mistakes and they're still being praised. And I understand it's to try and address the balance because our media hammers all the foreign players, Martial, Pogba, De Gea, Bruno. They always get hammerings. Like they feel like they get hammered more than the British players. But you also just have to call a spade a spade. That was a shot that he should save. And you hope that your good players, your better players, and your more experienced players are going to show up in the moments, the key moments. And that was a key moment. He should have saved that. And if he can't save that, then I think you just need to draw a line under this now and stop with this BS and stop pretending like his 17 clean sheets mean that he's one of our best players and all this kind of stuff, and just look at the cold hard facts. Why are people creating compilations of his mistakes? If you're a good goalie, you can't make compilations. You don't have enough mistakes to make compilations. It's only De Gea, it's only Lloris, it's only Almunia, or Roy Carroll, or I don't know, Tim Howard, or I don't know, I want to name other goalies who've dropped bare clangers in. Those are the goalies that get compilations made of them. You don't see compilations about Alisson. You don't see compilations about Neuer. You don't see compilations about even Edison, who's thrown in some clangers here and there. You just don't. So, look, I just think it hurts, particularly because it was like the decisive goal. If it was the first goal and we lost 2-1 and it was the other way around and the Gundogan like amazing Trivela volley goes in and that wins it for them, I don't know if it will hurt me that much, because like what the hell can you do about that? We talked about maybe you can close him down, maybe you can do something better, but at the end of the day that's a world-class goal. But the fact that it was the Gundogan's P roller that bounced about 4 times before it went in is the one that won it for them. And that a top goalie would have saved that shot. That's what hurts. So I think people are going to say keep him because we've got too many players that we need to get. But I would argue now the goalkeeper is up there with needing to get a striker and a midfielder. It's up there with them now because he's lost us too many matches and too many decisive ties or finals or semi-finals. He has to go. Like maybe you have a different opinion because you haven't got the emotion behind it. But
no, I think my opinion is not too different from you. Like, so when I first saw it, I immediately thought like Vision, right? Because I saw obviously it's like edge of the box off of like a free kick or whatever. So there's going to be loads of people in front of the ball. That it's going to be getting through bodies. So at the beginning, I was like, oh, in my mind, he's done well to just get to the ball in the first place and get a hand on it and do that kind of stuff. But I think when you looked at it like replayed and when you got some of the better angles that they showed, like you said, it only went past one person. And when it was struck, he had a pretty good vision of it. So he knows if it's going to the right-hand side of Varane, it's going to be pretty far wide or it's going to be in the corner. So I should be getting my over there. And so I think he actually did a good job of making up for his own mistake, which was bad positioning, right? Like you said, he was in the middle of the goal, but because Gundogan's shot was kind of from the right-hand side of the goal, from the goalkeeper's vision, he should have been further forward and further to the right to really close off that triangle. And then he managed to kind of recover a little bit to get to the ball in the first place, but then he just palms it into the goal. And like I said to you before in the group chat, if you can get your hand on it, you need to be saving it. And I think if you've touched the ball at all with your hand, you should have saved it. And so the best way I can characterize De Gea is his hands must be made of like Rocky Road flapjacks. You know the biscuits that you get that are just like super crumbly. You open it up and it's just all over the floor, all over your shirt already. He's got hands like that. It looks like it's got some sustenance and some metal behind it, and it folds like a toilet paper in the wind, mate. It's absolutely shocking that you can get all the way there off of a pea roller that comes off of his shin and palm it into your own net. You know what I mean? Like the good goalkeepers you see when you see these compilations and stuff, every single time they get a hand on it, it goes past the post. They get just about enough to go past it. And how can you...
biscuit wrist.
Exactly, he's got biscuit wrist.
Biscuit wrist. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the same as the Benrahma shot.
Yeah.
You remember what we did? I think the Benrahma, was it the second episode or something of the pod or something like that?
Yeah.
And we went. I went in on him again for the same thing. I agree with you. I think it's almost the same positioning error he makes and recovery he makes for the Benrahma one as he did for this. So he's too far central, and then he recovers and he makes up all the steps, gets down, gets a full hand on it, and it breaks it goes through his hand. And I don't understand it. I get it if you've got fingertips, right? I understand that fingertips might not be enough to provide the resistance against the ball to push it away, but your whole palm, getting a whole palm on something, you should be able to at least divert it far enough that it goes around the post. And the Benrahma one was arguably probably worse because it was further out. But this one, with all the importance of the match, what was happening, and how we kind of come back into it, it was a blow. It
With
was
a
a
P
big
roller as
blow.
well. It's a P roller off of his shin that bounces like 3 times. So it's got
But
it's got nothing behind it. So if you're
look at
getting
the
if you're
reaction,
getting your
Josh.
hand on the ball, I get it. If it's like Roberto Carlos slapping it from 40 yards and it goes rocket top corner and your hand can't really do anything about it. But he's flapped on a P roller. He's
But
got to be
Johns, you're
wearing
right.
like flipping Sondico gloves or Lonsdale gloves or something. There's definitely some
No, it's got to be Lonsdale.
Sports Direct gloves there that are going on. That
It's got to be Lonsdale.
Mike
because
Ashley strikes
Sondico,
again, mate.
Yeah, Sondico's top tier. You can't be mudding them. They're really good goalie gloves. But yeah, they're definitely Lonsdale or some rubbish that he's wearing. But nah, if you look at the reaction for the United players after that goal goes in, it's different. If you compare it with the Gundogan one, they all recognise they were probably going, "Well, f me, how the hell did that happen?" So there's a bit of shock. There's a bit of what could we really do? Don't worry, keep your spirits up. With the De Gea one, they look destroyed. After that goes in, you see some heads go down. You see people their reaction is like our reaction, like United fans' reaction, going, "How has that gone in?" You can't keep making those mistakes, even if it's minimal, even if it is just a positional thing, and then that little couple of steps stops you from being able to close off the space and make the proper save. You can't keep making those errors. So when we talked about the clean sheet stuff, I think we talked about on another ep. If you look at for the clean sheet hype, if you compare that with how many errors lead into goals, I think he's top of that as well. So which stat do you want to look at? You want to just look at the clean sheets, but you don't want to look at the errors leading to goals. So I think you've got to take them both into consideration and then think about it. Which one is more indicative of a player's performance? How many errors they've had leading to a goal, which you can personally say is only on them, or clean sheets where you've got 5 players involved in that, or maybe you could argue even 6. You could say Casemiro, the back 4, and him. They all own that clean sheet. So he can have nothing to do and they get a clean sheet, and you're just going to give him all the credit. So you have to think about this logically. You can't use that as a defense. Don't get me wrong. He's had good games. I can remember them where he's actually made a lot of good saves. But the problem is you can't have a similar level where you've been terrible. For a goalie, those terrible games have to be 1 or 2 a season. No more than that. And your top performances need to be in the 4s, 5s, 6s or more. And for him, he's got 2 or 3 or 4 good games where he's made good saves and he's been effective, and he's got 3 or 4, 5 or 6 clanging games where he's been shocking. And that's not a goalie that can win you a Premier League or get you to challenge or, ultimately even win you an FA Cup. It just can't happen. So he's got to go.
I mean, at this point, mate, it feels like you're about to cry. And I think, speaking of crying, there was one more topic I wanted to bring up, which was old best manager in Premier League history himself, Pep Guardiola, crying after he won it. I know you had some strong feelings about that. Let's keep it quick. But what did you think of Pep crying after winning the FA Cup?
Yeah, it was. It's like, remember when Aguero was leaving, and it was well known that him and Aguero hadn't got on well, and he wasn't a big fan of how Aguero pressed, and he worked hard, so he'd often bench him for Gabby Jesus. It felt like a big fake act. Like, why is he crying over the FA Cup? He was crying, hugging Haaland, hugging Grealish, hugging John Stones, doing so much histrionics. It was just over the top, man. And don't get me wrong, they might win a treble. They probably will win a treble. We'll talk about it maybe very briefly later, but it just felt like it was. I've got to be honest. It was bordering self-harm for me watching that post-match stuff, because the way Gary Lineker was in two languages, getting down on two, both knees for Pep was shameless. Alan Shearer even got, I expect Big Meeks and Michael Richard to, be a little bit extra. It's his team. He hasn't got much to show for it, but he's the biggest and best Man City pundit there is. Again, not much competition for that. But why is Shearer, getting down on two knees? Why is Lineker doing it? And then why are they rolling out Grealish and Johnny Stones? And don't get me wrong, I rate Johnny Stones, he's quality. But they getting all the meat, it was just felt like they were just ready. They'd been primed to just, give Man City a good servicing at the end of that match. And it felt over the top. Because I don't think they were that great in that match. That wasn't a match where you just go, whoa, best team ever, greatest manager ever, best striker ever, all of that stuff. Those weren't the matches. Don't get me wrong. They're in the shout for all of those things, 100%. But it just felt like that was their one shot. BBC had one shot to give Man City their love and adoration, and they just did it where it just didn't match up with the performance. So it was, I don't know why I carried on watching it. It was more to just banter with you guys afterwards, but as Mark Goldbridge says, my eyes were burning. It was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to nickname it Brexit Cup from now on, because the way they did that, yeah, I get it. It's a historic cup in England, and I get all of that. But the way that they rolled out Grealish, and they continuously do it, not just on this broadcaster, but everywhere else too. They roll him out for every single interview after a Man City game. Even though, and I think we can probably all agree on this, he's the worst part of the team. Like in that starting 11, he's the worst player in that team, but he's the one getting all of the, getting all the interviews. When was the last time you saw Rodri come on a camera and talk about the performance, even though he's like the backbone of that team? When was the last time you saw Bernardo Silva? Only recently they've started getting Gundogan on it with his like outstanding performances. He literally has to be Zidane at the end of the season for anyone to get him on a, and he speaks perfect English as well. So that kind of rattled me a little bit. I was like, why are we listening to Grealish and Stones? Get me Gundogan. He scored both like two of the goals. He was arguably their best player in the game. Get me somebody else. Like, why am I listening to Grealish's laddie rubbish all the time? Why have I got to listen to John Stones? He barely talks. So, unless he's saying, Wagwan Generals, I don't want to hear it from John Stones. Get me somebody else, mate.
No, I get you're right though, but I'm being extra salty. Like, look, I'm sure after United won the treble, after Arsenal won the Invincibles, had the Invincible season, there was just as much lapping them up in the media, and everyone was loving them off. But yeah, there is, and this is why I can understand part of the back to here. He's a foreign player. They need our support, because you see this kind of obvious media bias towards the British players, the certain British players that people love. Because you're right, Grealish shouldn't have been anywhere near any of the interviews. He was poor in that game. They should have got Gundogan. They should have got Rodri. They should have had Diaz. Was like a brick in front of their defense. He was great. And you've seen from other interviews and documentaries that those guys are actually more of the they're more of the motivational leaders of the team. So why don't you get them? Why are you getting Grealish? Why are you getting John Stones? Why are you getting, I don't know, random English players that, Calvin Phillips and all these guys from that? No one wants to hear from them. Let's hear from the actual winners and true leaders on that team. The Rodris, the Gundogans, even the KDBs. Like, let's listen to Haaland a bit as well, even though he was terrible in this match. But by the same logic, don't have Grealish on. He wasn't good in that match. He gave away a penalty. Regardless of if you want to say it was a pen or not, he gave away a penalty and didn't have a hand in any of the goals that City scored. So how was he on there? It's just obvious bias, isn't it? So I could go on for hours. I was so rattled at the end of that match that I think let's wrap it up there.
Yeah.
They've won the FA Cup.
Yeah, they've won it.
To be fair, They
Fair
deserve it.
Yeah.
We didn't deserve to win. Like I said, De Gea should have saved that shot.
Yeah.
He was also really poor with his feet. If you look at that first 20 minutes, he gave away every single pass.
Yeah.
Like, every single time the ball went back to him, he just hoofed it right down the middle to no one. Like, we need the ball. When we're playing City, you've got to cherish the ball. You have to be like very, very economical with your passing to make sure you can actually get some rhythm. And he just gave it away. And then if we talk about, Ericsson as well, and I don't want to go in, and in the group chat, they're like, come on, man,
Yeah.
he's got half a heart and all this kind of stuff. And I respect him. He's come back from unbelievable adversity And he was really good for us in the first half of the season. I was surprised actually. He surpassed my expectations. But since he's come back from the injury, it's not only his kind of obvious weaknesses in terms of his physicality and his speed, but it's also on the ball. He just hasn't been good. And like if you take a player who's always been pretty good with the ball and always been pretty bad physically, or kind of with his P&P, then if you take away his strengths, what is he? He's got nothing to offer.
No,
and the problem is we didn't have anyone to. The replacement was Scott McTominay.
Yeah,
and he's not of the quality. Sabitzer's injured, so that's why midfield is up there, because you can't have that option. You can't have Ericsson down and not have any option come in there. First, you should improve it to have a better starter, but you can't have that. So,
and I think
maybe we should get to the transfers.
Like on that note, I still think Ericsson is one of the better free transfers I've seen in quite a long time. Right, the fact that you got him for free, or you just signed him because he didn't have a club, I guess, after Brentford, but he has been really good, and so I think that leads nicely into my favourite player, Mason Mount, and some of the transfer rumours that are going on right now. And I think, and just for viewers out there, I'm not a Man United hater, right? It's not like any player that's linked to you, I'm just going to trash. I know I've gone in on Antony, but Ant, I've been complaining. We were at barbecues last year where I was telling everyone he's useless, right? And so obviously, let's get onto that. So it looks like you've managed to come in and nick him from Liverpool. It looks like I heard that you've agreed personal terms with him already. So it's looking like he's going to be a Man United player. What do you reckon of that? We'll get into some of the others as well, but what do you think about the Mount one?
Yeah, the Mount one's the main one that's been going around recently, hasn't it? It's like kind of picked up steam off the back of the end of the Premier League season. And it's a hard one because I've never been super impressed by Mount. I know he scored or assisted the winning goal in the Champions League final. I know he was good under Lampard when they were playing all the kids. I know all the obvious hype that people have put out around it. But when I've actually watched him, I've never been that impressed. And I actually think he's a player that makes more sense historically to go to a Liverpool, because that's probably where you'd be able to see some of his strengths come out in that kind of system that Jurgen Klopp's been playing. And I don't know if I can pinpoint how he's going to play with our team and under Ten Hag's system, because I haven't really seen a system similar to Jurgen Klopp's been implemented by Ten Hag this season. So it's a bit of an interesting one. There's a lot of conspiracies out there going around that we, trying to up the homegrown quota because we're about to sell a bunch of our kind of local homegrown players. And that might be possible. But man, that's one hell of a gamble to pay 50, 60 million or whatever they're saying the price will be for someone who essentially you're getting not only because of their ability, but also because, they fit a quota demand. But
yeah, I mean,
I'm kind of I'm a bit underwhelmed. I'm underwhelmed because when you look at that midfield, I think we need someone who helps in the first 2/3 of the play, in the progression parts from the back, helping Casemiro, helping our defenders, alleviate some of the pressure. So I look at the ones that you've been linked with and think, wow, they would be better at art. We need someone like that too. We need a Rice, Caicedo, that type of defensive, or not necessarily defensive midfielder, but someone who's able to transition through the thirds.
He's
rather
a two-way
than just
player. He can play defensively and he can play attacking football.
And you don't get that from Mount. Not that I've seen anyway so far. I haven't seen that from him. So don't get me wrong. He might work his bollocks off, which I've definitely seen. He works hard. He runs about. And, if we're going to play a high pressing game similar to the Klopp and the rock and roll kind of heavy metal football, then sure, that makes sense. Then I can see the logic. I still think it's a bit of a gamble because I think 50, 60 million, you could probably get a good player from Europe for less than that, who may be able to do a better job and may be slightly more talented. But then you've got the risk of them not knowing, the league and having to adapt, which you shouldn't necessarily have with Mount. So it's one of those ones where it's like it's an underwhelming kind of 6 out of 10 kind of signing, to be honest. And I've seen people quote 80 million and stuff like that. And if it's 80 million, walk away and never come back to the table, because that's worse than Maguire. No, not worse than Maguire. I can't say that. I was about to go real big, but it's almost at Maguire level of just like
Well, 80 million for a player
embarrassing.
that's got very little hype around them right now, right? Like with Maguire, he had quite a lot of hype at that time, right? So you bought him based off of some of that hype. To get Mount, he's probably at the lowest like the lowest level of hype that he's been since he come onto the scene, right? Because he was always like they were showing like videos of him when he was 14 playing for Chelsea Academy and whatever else, and he felt like he was going to be the nation's like next baby in terms of like, oh, we're going to love you, you work so hard kind of stuff. And he's kind of fallen off, not all of his own accord, obviously, because Chelsea have just gone straight into the mud recently, so it's not totally his fault, but it definitely feels like paying 80 million for a player that is really not that highly regarded worldwide at this moment in time seems like it seems like it's on brand for United to overspend, but it doesn't seem like it's a good deal.
Now, you make a good point, man. He's at the lowest ebb that he's probably been in the last few years, and he's got 1 year left on his contract. And Chelsea need to sell players. So if we go in there and spend anything more than like 60 million, including add-ons, and so like the upfront fee is whatever 40 or something, and the add-ons are like winning the league and winning the Champions League. If we do anything beyond that, we've had our pants pulled down again, and it doesn't look like we're going to change our transfer ways. And I should expect more, 85 million for Antony, 55 million for Martinez, kind of transfers going through, the rest of the summer. Which, to be honest, I don't know if I can. I don't know if my heart can cope with more of them, because
Well, I mean,
if we're going to do this with Mount, then boy.
Well, if you're going to do that with Mount, what are you going to do with Kane? And so I think we'll get onto that, right? Because obviously you talked about it before, like midfielders are a big problem for United right now in terms of that role that needs to be fulfilled. The other players that I'm seeing that you're linked to really like, so Hoyland, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but I think that's how you say it. Kolo Muani, Kane, you seem to be lining up like a few different options there in case the Kane one doesn't come through. What are you thinking right now of those three? Obviously, let's maybe start with Kane, because I think he'll fulfill that homegrown quota as well.
No, he will. He will.
Right?
So I can give you the answer in one. Kane, get him. Even if it costs 100 million, get him. Because I've seen a lot of people, these Twitter football tacticos or whoever online trying to do hot takes, say, "Oh, Kane's not good and blah blah, blah his age and all this rubbish." Get Kane. He's basically been the best striker in the Premier League for the last 5 to 6 years. Not always highest on the charts, but in terms of a proper striker, he's always been the best. Like in that time period. Okay, Salah may have outscored him. Certain other people from the wings may have outscored him at different times. Son, even the season before, outscored him. But if you look at the pure quality, you can't deny that Kane is a world-class striker. And if he's able to score 30 goals in that heap that is just up the road from me, then honestly, he would still be able to score the same, if not more, at a team like ours, where I don't think we struggle to create millions of chances. I think we need an outlet to come in as a centre forward, a focal point like Kane, and help our players like Rashford, like Sancho, like Antony, like Garnacho, who's looked really good, who's probably the only player who came, or the main player who came off the bench and did well today. He would do wonders for us. So I'd say sign Kane. Even if it goes up to 100 million, do it. If it goes silly numbers, then maybe start considering it. But even at 100 million, you can justify it if he comes in and starts banging goals for us, because he could do it for 3-4 years.
So I've heard that Real Madrid are interested, right? And so I mean, there's a big.
Well, then call it quits.
Well, I was just about to say, right? It's like Real Madrid get what they want, right? So I guess
then we won't get him.
So you reckon, if Real Madrid come in, even with the fact that he wants to stay in England and beat that goal record, you still think he'll go for it?
I think when there's a couple of things. If Real Madrid come in for you, I'm pretty sure 9 out of 9.999, even though it's not possible, out of 10 players will go. It doesn't matter, even English ones. Look at Jude Bellingham, right? Liverpool were out here, hey Jude, hey Jude, hey Jude, like they had him. I was sharing memes with you. Oh yeah, Jude once drank at this coffee shop, and now he's drinking, a drink that starts with the same letter, so that must mean he's coming to Liverpool. Rubbish. Real Madrid come in, he doesn't even remember Liverpool exists. He's going to Real Madrid. So I think I can't be arrogant. The same, if not worse, will happen to us. If a player we want Real Madrid come in for him, he's not considering United. He's just not. Like, Kane can come back to United when he's 35 and he's washed up and we need a striker still, and we'll give him 250 grand and he can go and beat Shearer's record then. Like, he won't come to us, I'm sure. So we need to get him before the Real Madrids consider it. And we need to pray and hope that Karim Benzema doesn't leave so that they won't necessarily need that striker to fill in for him. So that's my Kane take. The other two, I think actually I don't think they're in competition with each other. I think those targets are separate. So I think the Kane target and the Osimhen, that type of striker, is the main striker we want to try and get. And then the Kolo Muani and the Højlund and the Evan Ferguson is the young, like almost, kind of deputy striker, kind of like what City have done with Haaland and Alvarez, that we want to try and get to try and come in and take some game time off Kane when he needs to be rested.
I suppose that's
like
the nail
so,
in the coffin for Martial, then, isn't it?
I mean, it has to be. Like, I love him. He's been one of my favourite players going since he joined. A quick way to my heart is have a debut against Liverpool and score, a third goal and put them in their place. Beautiful, beautiful scenes. So you can't not love him because of that. And then he went to an FA Cup semi-final and put the nail in the coffin of the other side of Liverpool as well, and to get us to an FA Cup final. So, yeah, I've got a soft spot for him. But if you just can't, the best, AO was saying it all the time on the last episode, the best ability is availability. And in the last 2 years, he just hasn't been available. And I'll even say that this FA Cup final could have gone a different way if he played, just because of his importance to our team and what he offers. And he's got a great record against City. So I'm not saying we would have won, but, there are signs there that it could have been a slightly different game for us. So, yeah, I think you have to cut ties with him, or you have to just basically write him off and say he's the third striker. Whenever he's fit, he can maybe come in and whatever, but you can't, or make him maybe as a kind of a third option on the left wing, and that's it. So I think I would go for either Muani or Højlund. I've seen more of Muani, obviously at the World Cup. He had moments, and I know at Frankfurt he's done pretty well. So I think he's probably a slightly safer bet. But Højlund is like one of those young, up-and-coming rising stars, FM wonder kid type guys. So
yeah,
I think depending on the price, I'd take a gamble on him. But obviously, if the price gets crazy, probably not. I'd say maybe stick with Muani. But I'm not that bothered about that second striker option. I'm more bothered about the Kane. Get Kane. I don't want to hear people talk rubbish about him because he plays for Tottenham. Everyone is rubbish at top Spurs. They're all rubbish at top Spurs. But he's somehow managing to not look total rubbish at that complete, like, crazy show that's going on in down the road.
I can't think of another team that is carried by one person as much as them. So if he's making them look even somewhat decent with all the turnover that's happening there with managers and just the lack of quality that they have in that team, yeah, I agree with you. I think you need to be getting you need to be getting Kane. I think, yeah, I wouldn't go for Mount, but I guess if you can't get Frankie de Jong and if you can't get Caicedo or somebody else, then Mount's decent, I guess, as long as you're not paying too much for him. And then for Højlund...
Let me argue that, John.
Yeah.
Let me argue that Mount should not be he should not be replacing a defensive midfielder. He should be in conjunction with a Rice or a Caicedo or something like that. If we are getting a Mount and we completely leave that defensive mid, that player who builds through the thirds, if we leave that player off and we don't sign one, we're going to have a lot of problems next season. And Casemiro is going to have more strain on him, and we're going to have more problems coming out from the back and trying to play the way that he's trying to play. So Mount is almost like a luxury. The more important thing is get Kane, get a midfielder who can do that building through the thirds and who can play with Casemiro and replace him at certain times. And if you have money left and you still believe getting a Mount is good too, to try and take that Eriksen kind of role, then all good with me. But you're right. Don't get Mount if you're not going to get that DM. That is a problem. Then that makes me really question what Ten Hag's doing in terms of his strategy. It will really make me worried if that's the only midfielder we get.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And I think maybe the last thing we'll get onto, and I think we talk about a player carrying teams. I'm not going to be too harsh here, but obviously Rashford has carried you goal wise for quite a large part of this season. Obviously you're trying to get him to sign a new contract right now, and I think he's maybe asking for a little bit too much money. How confident are you that you're going to be able to get him over the line too?
Yeah, last segment on the United stuff before I'll ask you some questions about some of yours as well. I think Rashford will sign. I think he'll just probably end up getting the top part of whatever our salary kind of cap is that Ten Hag's put in place. So he'll probably get 300 odd grand plus, pretty hefty performance bonuses. And I'm fine with that. I don't really care about the money. I think with someone like Rashford, who's from Manny, he's a local guy, he's come through the academy. Just like when Saka gets a bumper deal, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about it when it's a player who's just come in and they don't really know like much about the club and there's no evidence to prove that they care. So I don't have that problem with Rashford. Okay, he's had, portions of poor form, he's dipped, he's maybe looked like he's been disinterested at certain times, but I don't think anyone can ever question like his love for the club. So I think if you give him, the top end of whatever kind of salary cap we have, I'm fine with that, and I think eventually that's what will happen. I just think it's a bit of posturing, and then eventually we'll sign him. I'm really, really confident that you won't see Rashford leave, and we'll see him signing a deal. And I hope we kind of take care of him, because I actually think a spiteful part of someone might have looked at last season and seen when things are bad and everyone was talking about get rid of him, and he was probably trying to getting his agent to try and come to the table to get an extension then, and United were like, oh, we'll wait. A spiteful person might say, screw you, you didn't believe in me, I'm going to leave. But I hope and I think there are no signs of that coming from his camp. So I'm pretty hopeful that he's gonna sign. What was it? Sign the ting, like Rio Ferdinand said, or you guys were saying about Aubameyang, and we'll keep him on. So let's end the United Stand segment of the podcast and get to you guys, because I know you haven't played much football since the end of the Prem, but you've obviously got targets, and we talked about Rice, Caicedo. You've had that young right back from Galatasaray, Bowie, and I think Castagna from relegated Leicester. So give me a thought. There's a lot of momentum around Rice, especially. What's your thoughts on him?
I mean, so I like you said before, of those players, I see us trying to fulfill 4 positions right now. So I think the first one is, it's clear with this Bowie Castagna thing that's going on here that we're trying to get some backup on the right-hand side, right? So I think obviously that, to me, tells me that Ben White is going to be used maybe more in the centre as cover if we get, lose Saliba, and we'll get onto him later as well in the contract. But I think that to me signals that we're looking to, be able to utilise Ben White as a proper centre back again. So that's good to me. Am I happy with Bowie and Castagna? Not really. But again, if it's just about building squad depth and it's about building, a team that can play European football as well as Premier League football and all of the other cups, then I'm okay with it, as long as we don't pay too much money. For the Caicedo and the Rice part, I see that as 2 different positions, right? I want a DM, like a proper, like real defensive DM who can break up play, is physical, puts challenges in, is smart about his challenges and gets away with them, that progresses the ball as much as he needs to, but not, marauding forwards. And that's where I think the Caicedo makes a lot more sense to me. I want cover, or I even want somebody who's going to come in and replace Partey. Like, I'm not saying that we have to replace Partey. I'm saying I want someone to compete with him and to be good enough to get him out, because Partey's getting on. And I think Caicedo is the perfect person for that. It's looking like they're going to take maybe between 70 and 80 million. It looks like what you told me before, that Chelsea have signed Ugarte or some other guy, so maybe they won't go in for him. And he seemed like, outside of you guys, our main kind of competition for him. I'm hoping that we can get him, because I think that will be real intentional to say we want Caicedo and we want Rice, because we're trying to build a team to beat City, right? And I think with Rice, obviously loads of other clubs, it seems like since the end of the season, loads of other clubs are now being linked with him, which is wonderful to see. The fact that he's English on top of that, I have a horrible suspicion we're going to get absolutely bumped. I'm talking camel hump bumping. We're going to get battered for him. I'm hearing that they want 120. We're trying to aim more for like 95 million. I don't see that happening. We're going to have to hit the 9-figure mark to get him, right? We just have to accept that. And it looks like, we are progressing and we're about to put in an official bid. I don't know what that means, why we haven't put one in already, but we should be putting in an official bid for him. If we pay 100 million, I'm fine with that. That's the English tax. Get it? Cool. But I want to reiterate, we need either one of Bowie and Castagna. We need Rice and we need Caicedo. I don't want to see us go, oh yeah, Rice and Caicedo are interchangeable. Let's just get them in. If we're losing Xhaka, then we're just going to have a straight swap replacement with him and we're not gaining any depth in the midfield then, are we? And we saw Partey fell off a cliff at the end of last season, right? He was shocking. He was putting in some real clangers at the end of that season. He was getting injured and so on and so forth. So it's clear to me that if we lose Xhaka and we just replace him with Rice, we haven't progressed too much in terms of depth. We've made that first team squad better, sure, but we haven't progressed in depth, which is what we're going to need next season when we're playing in 4 different competitions, right? So I want to see us buy all of those 3 positions. And then I've heard some rumblings about Wahi, the guy from Montpellier, who looks pretty good. I wouldn't mind a striker as well. Maybe I'm being a bit greedy here to try and go after 4 relatively large signings, but I want all 4 of them. I haven't seen Elie Wahi, haven't seen Montpellier. Don't watch the French league because it's but get him. If he's exciting, if he's if it's going to be like the Saliba type thing, then yeah, get him. Fine, I'm cool with that.
I've got a question for you then, because I hear you, man, completely. I think the Bowie Castagna links and looking like you looking at right backs, I think is actually a positive, because I think Tomiyasu and White are very similar players, and I actually think they're both probably better off at centre back. But what's been good about this season is White's looked really good at right back. So you could even keep White at right back and just use Tommy as a backup centre back if Saliba's injured, so you don't have to see Rob Holding again. And then Castagna or Bowie, I've never seen Bowie play, I have to be perfectly honest. But I've seen Castagna play and he looks like a decent fullback, and I think he can also cover left back, because you've obviously got all those rumours about Tierney maybe leaving. So that would be a really good signing, I think. And I think he's been a decent player for Leicester, despite them being absolutely pants. But I think you're completely right about the midfield. You need 2, because you need an extra midfielder, and if Xhaka leaves, then you need 2. That's just simple maths. 1 + 1 = 2. And I think Rice and Caicedo are the best that's probably going to be on the market, man. Maybe in Europe this summer. So if you could get those 2, that would be a mad coup. And they're both Prem proven. They both can interchange, because I think Rice and Caicedo can both play deeper and more box to box. So I think they could cover both Partey and Xhaka's roles. So I think that would be a beautiful. The Wahi one's an interesting one, because you've obviously a bit of an elephant in the room. You've got Balogun, who was in the top of the scoring charts in France alongside Wahi when he was playing at Reims. So surely if you get Wahi, that means it's bye-bye Balogun, right? And how do you feel about that?
It looks like it will be. From what I'm reading right now, it looks like Balogun's... We talked a little bit about the spite, right? And I feel like we'll get onto Saliba. He's got a bit of that in him. I think Balogun's kind of said, yeah, I'm done here now, right? Unless I'm getting first team football, I'm not coming back, right? When you go from banging in loads of goals in a season for one of the top flight leagues, even though I just said it was and then you want to go back to being a backup striker and having to compete with Nketiah, like, I don't think Balogun's going to want to do that, right? Now he's American. He wants to play for the USA team, right? He wants to be getting first team football. He wants to go to the next World Cup. He wants to do all this other stuff, right? He's got to be playing first team football. I don't think he's going to get that. And again, it's the Xhaka problem. A player wants to get first team football. A few years ago, we probably would have given them first team football because of how bad we were. Now, though, we got to be looking, we're leveling up, right? We're on to bigger things as well, right? So we need to be thinking about, all right, what's next? And if Balogun needs to get first team football, then let's shift him. If Wahi's willing to come in and be somewhat rotational and have to fight for his place and the fact that he's young, I'm cool to replace them. As long as we don't get bumped either way. right, we need to be getting what Balogun's worth, and we shouldn't be paying too much for Wahi. So if we do that, I'm okay with that. Of course, it seems illogical to like sell somebody who banged in, has pretty much the same amount of promise as the guy that you get in. But if it's like a straight swap and we don't really lose anything financially, then I can deal with it. I'm not too bothered about it.
I guess the other question is about Saka, isn't it? Because he obviously tailed off at the back end of the season. Are there any links, or what do you think in terms of getting someone in to cover Saka? Or are you happy with re-signing Reece Nelson to stay on and have him do that? What do you think about that?
So I'm happy to have Reece Nelson stay on. I just think it will also be good to have Smith Rowe, right? Because Smith Rowe, one of the big strengths of his is he can play in a lot of positions too, right? We've seen him play centre mid, seen him play cam, we've seen him play, left wing. He can play all over the place, and I think it's becoming pretty clear to me from what I'm reading that we're going to keep him. He's not up for sale. So if he can stay fit, I know he's coming back from a pretty bad injury, but if he can stay fit, if we re-sign Reece Nelson, I'm kind of happy with that, to be honest with you. I like the idea of like bringing up our wingers because they actually look pretty exciting, right? Like the big thing as well is like the homegrown thing that you talked about before, right? We need to keep these kinds of players in our team. And I like the idea of keeping a young core and keeping some excitement in terms of young new wingers and young new attackers coming through our system. So I think Emil Smith-Rowe, Saka, Martinelli, Trossard, and then, Reece Nelson, I feel like that's all right. I feel like we can do something with that. And I think as long as he uses them, as long as Arteta actually uses the players he's got at his disposal and doesn't just like leave Saka out there when he's clearly like flagging, then we should be fine. But again, that remains to be seen because he's run Saka into the ground.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess the worry is, right, you guys, you've seen this movie before, right? Like I remember the picture of Wenger with Wilshere, Ramsey, Jenkinson, Kieran Gibbs, and all the British core, and this is the future of Arsenal, blah blah blah. And only Ramsey came out of that picture with any kind of stats and any kind of achievements. The rest of them just were either flops or failed wonder kids or just didn't make it. And I guess you've got that worry, don't you? If he doesn't play Smith Rowe, if he doesn't play Nelson, they'll either leave or they'll just rot on the bench, and you won't see that potential come to fruition. So you got to play him, and I think Reece Nelson was one of your brighter spots at the back end of that season. So I think he should be given some sort of reward for that, and I think he should be given a chance. And I think Io brought it up kind of on the group chat maybe before. It's baffling why Smith Rowe hasn't had more of a shout in the back end of the season either, because beginning of last season, wasn't he your top scorer for a part of it or something? He was in double digits. He was banging in goals. He looked the whole Smith Rowe Saka song.
Yeah, he's a
made
big part
sense
of it,
for both of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like Smith Rowe, man. I have to say, this crop of Arsenal youngsters from Hale End, they're really likable, man. Eddie Nketiah as well. Even though he keeps scoring against us, but I like all of those guys, man. I think I want them to do well, and I hope that they're given a proper crack at the whip and they're given a chance. But mentioning another youngster, although he didn't come through Hale End, you bought him super young. I've been seeing some slightly worrying rumours online about this contract situation with Big Willie Saliba. Well, that's probably not the right phrase considering
that
video.
You're trying to make this a triple an XXX podcast out here, mate.
But anyway, what's your take on it? Because it's looking like he's rejected a proposal. What do you think is going to get done?
I'm going to be honest with you. Like, again, he's on what, like 40-ish grand now. Come on, I mean, for a player that on this podcast last week got voted our best player of the season, you can't be on 40 grand at Arsenal. So I hear that we're trying to triple that to 120, and he's saying no. And if you're Saliba and you've just seen Saka get, what was it, 200 and something?
Yeah, I think he's on 200.
Exactly.
Also, something to note, Saliba was also controversially voted signing of the season as well.
Well, we won't get onto that because I think me and you both disagreed with that, but hold tight, Io, for that one. I think if you're Saliba, right, you've had probably or you've contributed to one of Arsenal's best seasons in a very long time. You've been a very crucial reason as to why. And as soon as you get injured, we fall off a cliff, whether it's for that reason or not. If you're Saliba, you got to be thinking, yeah, mate, you got to be giving me at least close to what Saka's getting, right? And I'm hearing that that's kind of what he wants. He wants about 200 grand. So if that's what he wants, I don't like setting the precedent of giving everybody 200 grand just because of like, the whole Aubameyang type stuff that went on before. But I think we need to be giving it to him. And like I mentioned before, and what you mentioned with Rashford, right? I think there's some spite in Saliba because he's thinking to himself, you bought me, you sent me on loan a bunch of times, you never played me. He was on loan for quite a long time. You rarely see a player like that in that situation ever come back to that team. It's usually, oh, we signed you, actually you're not that great. Loan, and then eventually he's gone, right? You don't see too many players come back from that abyss of loaning. And he certainly has. So if I'm him, I'm going to be a bit spiteful. And I've heard some rumours that him and Arteta don't get along for that specific reason, right? Because he feels hard done by. And so I've heard that PSG are in for him. I'm hearing all kinds of stuff, right? And like Sergio Ramos ain't going back to PSG now. So it would appear they've got maybe a gap in that centre back position. So, I'm a little worried. I've got to be honest with you. Like it wouldn't be crazy out of the question for us to see Saliba leave. And I really hope we get that locked and loaded, like that contract done as quickly as possible, because what I'm anticipating, again, I might be making a narrative up in my head here. If we let him go, or let's say if we struggle with this contract signing for a while, and then someone comes in, swoops in and gets him close to the end of the season, we're not going to have very much time to replace him or buy anybody else. So we need to get that contract stuff sorted out ASAP. I think if we don't, that will be a horrible sign for me that we're not really serious and we're not planning very well. Edu or whoever is not doing a great job of that. So I hope just give him 200 grand and let him be. Right? He looks great. He's young. He played absolutely world class last season. So just give him the money. 200 grand in the grand scheme of things ain't that much these days. All right.
Do you think it could cause unrest though? Because I do understand what you're saying. 200 grand is not, I mean, it's a huge sum of money. We'd both be very happy with that. Most people would. But in terms of football, the football landscape, we're not talking, the amount that Messi and all these guys are on. It's an acceptable amount within the football game, right? We hear about that number being bandied around. But the only thing I think about is Saka's been your star boy, your top dog. He's been this has been, his best season so far, but he's had a couple of good seasons before. This isn't just, his first breakout season. And people could argue that this is Saliba's first proper season. Well, not they could argue, that's a fact. That's his first proper season for Arsenal. He's been really good. He's been transformational for your team. But is it to the level that it warrants 200 grand? Or are you just saying that because it would be too painful to let him go, and that's why you want to give him it?
You bring up a good point. I mean, the principle is important, and it looks like to me Arteta's trying to build a team built on principle and on rules and clear, this is what we do, this is what we don't do. And he's been pretty clear about that, right? With what he did with Aubameyang and that. And so I guess in that regard, no, Saliba doesn't deserve to be on 200 grand if Saka's on 200 grand, if that makes sense, right? So positioning wise, he shouldn't be at the same level as Saka, just off of what he's contributed to the club so far. If we could give him 150 or 160 with some add-ons, like some appearance, football manager type stuff, right? Put in some yearly wage rises, whatever, I don't know, whatever the players are asking for. Give some of those things to him to make him feel like, yeah, you're getting up close to that, but, we need to see more from you. I feel like that's acceptable to me. If you're putting me on the spot and saying you either lose him or you pay him 200 grand, I'm going to have to say desperation, 200 grand, sure. The reason I say that is because it's not like we're giving him more than Saka. It's not like we're going to go and give him 400 grand or completely break our wage structure or something crazy like that. So if we give him 200 grand, there needs to be a serious conversation. I want to see at least a 5-year contract with him. Maybe get me a Chelsea type contract, give him 8 years. And I want to see some like real commitment from him to be part of this team. So at the end of the day, yes, I will give him 200 grand if I absolutely have to. If I gun to my head, he's getting 200 grand, mate. You've seen me on FM. I'm paying all sorts.
No, I agree with you as well, man. Like, I don't think it's ideal. I think you negotiate with him if you can, try and find a middle ground and a compromise. But ultimately, there are a lot of people out there saying that the moment Saliba did his back in against Sporting was a really pivotal moment in your title charge. And I can't lie, I thought he was one of the, I thought Gabriel and Saliba were the best centre backs in the league this season. And he was a big part in really propping up Gabriel in that period. Don't get me wrong, he made mistakes. There were a couple of strikers that had him, but overall, I haven't seen a defender come into a league like that in his debut season and do so well and look so composed and have such an impact on the rest of the team. So if it means giving him 200 grand, putting him on parity with Saka, uh, I don't think Saka and I don't think this crop of youngsters in your team are going to be. They don't look like the types to start rocking the boat and making a big deal about it. I think they care, about unity and they're always willing to go in a huddle with Zinchenko and stuff. So I feel like they're in it together. They're in it together. So no, I mean it's worrying, isn't it? It's worrying when all the news comes out, but I'm pretty sure he'll sign on the line and he'll stay with you guys and he'll keep building. I'll be shocked, honestly. I'll be shocked if he went anywhere this season. I'll be shocked if he, got into the final 6 months of his contract and it even got that sticky. I expect it to be signed probably, if not during the summer, but, early next season. I think that's what you can expect.
Yeah, no, I bloody hope so. That would be to me the biggest indication that this was a fluke season. If we go and lose some of the better players in that team over this summer, or throughout the duration of next season as well, that to me is like telling us, all right, we're not really serious, right? If we're looking at Saliba and saying, oh yeah, best centre back in our team this season, arguable. I know some people got Gabriel on their list, but best centre back in our team this season, had our best season in a very, very long time. Oh, we'll just let him go to PSG. That tells me you're not serious. So I hope to goodness that does not happen. But if it does, it will just be part and parcel of the Arsenal struggle that I've been through over the last 20 years, mate.
Yeah, I don't think it will, man. I think you'll be in, happier times. And I think this summer, if you get Rice and Caicedo and Xhaka leaves, I think that's a sign of pure ruthlessness from Arteta, and I think that's great. I think, even if he lets go of Tierney and a few other players, I don't agree with it. But as long as there's a plan and you get a better player come in, or you can see what he's trying to do, then that makes sense. But I agree with you. If Saliba leaves, that's definitely something that you could say definitely isn't in the plan, and that kind of would shake your confidence a bit. But I don't think you'll be in that situation. And I think I would say at this point you've got more promise and more excitement to look at when it comes to your transfer dealings. Obviously, we've got the takeover that might not happen, that may happen. That's still going to, I think, impact our
Saw
transfer
Avram
window.
at the game today, mate. He's up there next to Sarau.
Yeah, I know we're trying to keep the swearing down because last week I was super hungover and I was just throwing swear words ever. But that guy is a massive, and you're going to have to beep that one out. So I don't want to talk about him. He needs to get out the club and stop playing these games with the bidders and just put us out of our misery. If you're going to sign a deal with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, sign the deal. If you're going to sign a deal with Qatar, sign the deal. Just the more hours go by and days go by and weeks go by, it just looks like this was all just a big ploy and there's something really fishy going on. So that's the reason why I think you've probably got a better summer ahead, or you've got more certainty, so you could probably go in with more excitement.
Yeah.
And even if we get Kane, even if we get a couple of the signings, we probably will come out still ruining some bad transfer dealings, missing out on players, overspending on players, letting players go for free. I think I've probably got a bit more trepidation going in. But I'll tell you what, mate, this podcast was supposed to be a short one. It's ended up being quite a long one. But
yeah,
I feel much better now. I feel like this was almost like
therapy
this
session.
was almost like it was almost like my other therapy
Yeah.
session for the week. So
There you go.
yeah, thanks, mate.
No worries. I think we'll wrap it up there. We were going to get on to City and Inter, but who cares? They're going to get the treble. Let's give.
They've won the treble.
They've won the treble.
They've won it.
Best Premier League manager of all time and all that.
I'm just praying, Lukaku. We need Lukaku with the Meg the Stallion tax to come in. Come on.
He's got to work that body oddy, as they say in it. So yeah. But anyway, we'll wrap it up here. Like I said at the beginning, if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple, please give us a follow. We'd really, really appreciate it. And if you can, give us a review of how you like it. A 5-star one would be great. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please, subscribe, like, comment, share if you can. It will really help us to get, a bigger audience and to be able to get some of the, the bollocks that comes out of our mouth to more ears. All right. Anyway, cheers, Ant.
Cheers, Johns. Thanks a lot. See you next week for probably just a pure transfer podcast. Although we'll probably have to talk about the treble for a little bit, but we'll concentrate on the transfers.
we can farm up the combined 11.
Oh, for God's sake.
All right, mate.
Nice one.
Cheers.
See you next week.